My contractor called me on a Tuesday morning while I was in the middle of a client meeting. I almost let it go to voicemail. I'm so glad I didn't. "Miss Carter," he said, "I just need to confirm your parents told me last night that you're signing over the project account to them going forward. Should I start taking direction from them instead of you?" I asked him to repeat that. He did. I sat there for a full 5 seconds, completely still, while my client kept talking about kitchen cabinet finishes. And then something cold and very calm settled into my chest. The kind of calm that doesn't feel like peace. It feels like a decision. I told my client I needed 10 minutes. I stepped into the hallway, and I said 4 words to my contractor that changed everything. Freeze the entire project. Let me back up, because you need to understand how we got here. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old, and I'm an interior designer with my own small firm in Atlanta. I've been building my business for 6 years, and somewhere along the way, I also built up a network of contractors, suppliers, electricians, and architects who I work with regularly. People who trust me. People whose invoices go through my company accounts. That detail matters. Remember it. About 14 months ago, my parents told me they wanted to buy a house. Not just any house. A 5-bedroom colonial in a suburb outside of Nashville, the kind of place my mother had been clipping photos of since I was a child. My father had recently retired. My mother wanted this to be their forever home. They had enough saved for the down payment and mortgage, but the house needed significant work. New kitchen, 2 bathrooms fully gutted, hardwood floors refinished throughout, the back deck rebuilt from the ground up. The quotes they were getting from local contractors were, according to my mother, highway robbery. That's when my mom called me. "Claire, baby, you do this for a living. You know people. Can you just take a look at it?" I went to Nashville. I walked through the house. It was a good bones property, genuinely beautiful structure underneath the dated finishes. And I made a mistake that I now understand was the beginning of all of this. I got excited. I love renovation projects. I love the process of seeing something become what it was always supposed to be. I started sketching ideas on my phone before we even left the driveway. My parents' budget for renovations was $40,000. I looked at my sketches, looked at the scope of work, and quietly did the math. To do it right, the way I was already picturing it, was going to run closer to $70,000. Probably more. I should have handed them a referral list and driven back to Atlanta. Instead, I told them I'd handle it. I want to be honest about my reasoning, because I think it matters. It wasn't purely selfless. I genuinely wanted this for them. My parents had worked hard their whole lives. My father drove a city bus for 27 years. My mother managed a pediatric office. They had never owned a home that felt like it truly belonged to them. And I was at a point in my career where I could make this happen. Not easily, but I could do it. I also thought, and this is the part that feels naive now, that doing something this significant for my family would change something between us, that it would finally make my parents see me as capable, as an equal. Not as their youngest daughter who plays with paint swatches for a living, which is a direct quote from my father at Thanksgiving 3 years ago. I structured the whole thing through my firm. Every contractor was someone I had an existing professional relationship with. Every material was ordered through my company accounts, which meant I got trade pricing sometimes 30 or 40% below retail. That's actually how I was able to stretch the budget as far as I did. When all was said and done, I put in $68,400 of my own money, on top of absorbing the trade discounts that would have otherwise cost my parents significantly more. I paid my contractors directly. Every invoice came to me. My parents knew the number. We sat at their kitchen table in the rental they were staying in while the work was done, and I showed them a spreadsheet. Every line item, every cost. My mother cried. My father shook my hand, which, for those of you who didn't grow up with a stoic Southern man, is basically the emotional equivalent of a standing ovation. We agreed that this was a gift. Not a loan. I wasn't going to hold it over them or expect repayment. I just wanted them to have the home they'd always wanted. What I did not agree to, what we never once discussed, was what happened next. The renovation took about 4 months. I was in Nashville almost every other weekend, managing the crews, making decisions on site, coordinating deliveries. I was also running my actual business from my laptop in an Airbnb rental 2 miles from the property. It was exhausting, and I won't pretend otherwise. But I was happy. The house was becoming something extraordinary. And the whole time, my parents were talking to their friends, their church community, my father's old coworkers, everyone about the renovation. They were hosting little informal walkthroughs while work was still being done. My mother was posting progress photos on Facebook. Not once, in any of those posts, did she mention that I was funding and managing the entire project. I noticed. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to seem like I was doing this for recognition. But I noticed. The house was finished in early spring. It was, genuinely, one of the most beautiful projects I have ever worked on. The kitchen alone, white oak cabinets, unlacquered brass fixtures, a farmhouse sink, this incredible marble-look porcelain that I sourced from a supplier I'd worked with for years, was better than kitchens I'd designed for paying clients. The primary bathroom had a freestanding soaking tub and a double vanity with unlacquered brass fittings to match. The back deck was rebuilt in composite material, with a pergola and string lights. It looked like something out of a magazine, because I designed it to. My parents moved in on a Saturday in April. I helped them move. I assembled furniture. I hung artwork. I organized the pantry. Then my mother mentioned the housewarming party. We're thinking late June. She told me over the phone about 2 weeks after they'd moved in. Something big. We want to celebrate with everyone. I said that sounded wonderful. I asked if she needed help planning it. Oh, we've got it, she said. We're just going to use the same people you used for the renovation, the caterer you recommended, the rental company for the tables and linens. We already called them. I thought that was a little odd, but I didn't push back. My mother is organized. She plans things. I assumed she'd reached out to get quotes. 3 weeks went by. I was deep in a project for a client in Buckhead and barely surfacing for air. I texted my mom a couple of times. She responded, but the texts were shorter than usual. A little distant. I chalked it up to her being busy with the party planning. Then Marcus, that's my primary event rental contact. Someone I've worked with on probably a dozen client events, texted me directly. Hey Claire, quick question. Your mom is saying to bill the June 14th event to your company account and that you've authorized it. That right? I read that text 3 times. I called Marcus immediately. He told me my mother had contacted him presenting herself as my representative, told him I was handling the financial side but was too overwhelmed with work to be in touch directly, and asked him to coordinate everything through her while billing my account. My account. Without asking me. Without telling me. My mother had contacted a vendor I introduced her to and told him she had my authorization to charge my business. I asked Marcus not to confirm or deny anything to my parents yet, and told him I'd call him back within the hour. Then I called my caterer. Same story. My mother had reached out, same framing, same instruction to bill my company. I sat in my car in a parking garage in Atlanta for a while after that. Not crying, not panicking, just thinking. Then I called my contractor, the one overseeing some small finishing work still being wrapped up at the house, and that's when he told me what I described at the beginning. That my parents had told him they were taking over the account going forward. I said, freeze the entire project. And then I made a few more calls. Here's something most people don't know about how trade accounts work in my industry. When a designer like me has an established relationship with a vendor, those accounts are in the designer's name. The vendors extend credit and preferential pricing because of the relationship with the designer, not the end client. My parents were the end clients. The accounts were mine, every single one. My mother thought she'd found a workaround. She thought because she'd watched me make phone calls and send emails for 4 months, she understood how it all worked. She thought my vendors would just transfer their loyalty to her. They didn't, because that's not how it works. And because these are people who've worked with me for years, and they called me the moment something felt off. Within 48 hours of that Tuesday morning call, I had spoken to every single vendor my mother had contacted. I explained the situation professionally, no drama, no oversharing. I simply clarified that I had not authorized any charges to my accounts, that any agreements made in my name without my consent were not binding, and that I would be pausing all services related to the June 14th event until further notice. Every single one of them understood immediately. Every single one. The housewarming party, which my parents had been planning for 6 weeks, which my mother had already sent invitations for, which had over 80 confirmed guests, had no caterer, no rental furniture, no florals, no event lighting, and no bartending service. I did not call my parents to tell them this. I waited. My father called me 4 days before the party. He was confused at first, and then, as the conversation went on, something shifted in his voice. He'd been talking to my mother. He already knew more than he was letting on. "The vendors are saying there's some kind of hold on the account," he said. "Yes," I said. "I placed it." Silence. Claire. "Dad," I said, "did you know that Mom contacted Marcus and told him she had my authorization to charge my business account for a party I was never invited to help plan?" Another silence. Longer. "You would have been involved," he said. "We just wanted to handle the hosting ourselves." "I wasn't informed," I said. "I found out because Marcus texted me to verify what Mom told him. She told him I was too busy to be in contact. She told him to bill me. My father didn't have an answer for that. I told him I needed to be honest with him, that I had spent $68,400 building them a home, not because I expected anything in return, but because I loved them and I wanted good things for them. And that I had discovered, almost by accident, that my mother had been attempting to charge additional expenses to my business accounts without my knowledge or consent. That if Marcus hadn't texted me, I might not have found out until I saw the invoices. "I need you to understand what that is, Dad," I said. "That's not a miscommunication. That's not a misunderstanding. She was using my name and my business to authorize charges she had no right to authorize." He was quiet for a long time. "What do you want to do?" he finally asked. "I want to know if you knew," I said. He told me he hadn't known the specific details. He said he knew my mother had reached out to the vendors to get things set up, but that he'd assumed it was with my blessing since I'd introduced them. He sounded, honestly, like a man who was realizing in real time that the version of events he'd been given was incomplete. I believed him. My father is a lot of things, but he's not a schemer. That was my mother's territory. She called me the next morning. It was a hard conversation. My mother is someone who, when confronted, does not apologize immediately. She reframes. She redirects. She said she hadn't realized there would be a problem with using the vendor contacts, since I was the one who'd introduced them. She said she was just trying to save me the trouble of having to coordinate the party on top of everything else. She said the party was for the whole family, and she didn't think I'd want to be bothered. I let her finish, and then I said, very quietly, "Mom, you told Marcus I was too overwhelmed with work to be in contact. You told him to bill my company. You presented yourself as my authorized representative. At what point in that process were you trying to save me trouble?" She didn't answer that. I told her the vendors were on hold. I told her that I wasn't going to authorize any charges to my business for an event I wasn't consulted about. I told her that if she wanted to host a housewarming party, she was absolutely welcome to, but she would need to contact vendors on her own, under her own name, and pay for them herself. She told me I was being vindictive. She said I was punishing her for a misunderstanding. She said that after everything they'd done for me growing up, I couldn't do this one thing for them. I have thought a lot about what she said, about the framing of it, after everything they'd done for me. The implication being that my parents raising me, which is a thing parents are supposed to do, somehow created a debt that I was now refusing to pay. And that $68,400, the nights I spent in Nashville, the weekends I missed with my friends, the client work I deprioritized to be there, none of that counted toward that debt. None of that was enough. I said, "Mom, the house is my gift to you, the party is not." And I ended the call. The party happened, scaled back, from what I heard through my aunt who called me privately and, to her credit, told me she thought my mother had handled things badly. They rented a folding table from somewhere. They ordered food from a barbecue restaurant. 40 of the 80 guests showed up, probably because the invitation had already been sent, and people had already made plans. I was not there. My brother called me the week after. He and I have always been close, and I could hear in his voice that this one was hard for him. He lives in Nashville, just 20 minutes from my parents, so he was in the middle of all of it in a way I wasn't. He told me Mom was telling people I'd pulled the vendors at the last minute over a grudge. He said Dad was mostly staying quiet. I told him everything. All of it. The text from Marcus, the calls to the caterer, what my mother said she'd told them. I offered to forward him the texts as documentation if he wanted to see them. He didn't say much for a while. Then he said, "She really told him she had your authorization?" "Word for word," I said. He exhaled. "I'm sorry, Claire. I didn't know." I told him I didn't think he did. And I wasn't angry at him. I just needed him to understand why I did what I did, because I knew the version of this story he'd been hearing wasn't the full picture. He's been texting me more since then, checking in. I think he's doing his own processing. My grandmother, my father's mother, 83 years old and sharper than anyone I know, called me about a month after everything happened. She lives in a retirement community in Knoxville and doesn't involve herself in family drama as a rule. So when she called, I picked up. She said, "I heard what happened. All of it. From your uncle. I want you to know something, and I want you to hear it clearly." She paused. "Your mother has always treated your generosity like a faucet she could turn on and off at will. I've watched it since you were old enough to have your own money. What she did this time was wrong, not misguided. Wrong. And you were right to turn off the faucet." I didn't say anything for a second because I was trying very hard not to cry. "I also want to say," she continued, in that calm, deliberate way she has, "that the house is beautiful. I saw the photos your aunt sent. You have a real gift, Claire. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like what you do is small." She knew, without my saying it, that playing with paint swatches had stuck with me longer than it should have. It's been about 5 months now. My relationship with my mother is in a complicated place. We've spoken, mostly about surface things, family news, holidays, nothing that touches what happened. She has not apologized, not directly, not in a way that showed she understood what she'd actually done. She's made comments that suggest she still sees herself as the wronged party. I've accepted that might not change, and I've had to make peace with the fact that I can love someone and still not trust them. That those two things can exist at the same time. My relationship with my father has gotten, unexpectedly, a little closer. He called me one evening a few weeks after everything, and just talked. Not about the party, not about my mother. He talked about his retirement, about the neighborhood, about how he'd been restoring an old radio in the garage. At the end of the call, he said, quietly, "The kitchen is my favorite room I've ever been in. I want you to know that." And then he changed the subject. That was enough. That was more than enough. The vendors are all still in my contact list, still my professional relationships, still exactly where they were before my mother decided she could walk into those relationships and reroute them without asking. Marcus sends me referrals sometimes. We had lunch last month. He told me he'd had a feeling something was off the moment my mother called him, but didn't want to act without checking with me first. "That's why I texted, instead of just going along with it," he said. "Sometimes one text changes everything. I built something real in that house in Nashville. I put months of my life and a significant amount of my savings into it, freely and with love. That part is not something I regret. I don't regret what I gave. I regret that I didn't pay closer attention to the signs that were there earlier, the Facebook posts where I was invisible, the walkthroughs I wasn't credited for, the slow and quiet way my contribution was being absorbed into a story that wasn't about me. But I also know this. The moment I found out what was happening, I did not hesitate. I did not wait for someone to tell me I was overreacting. I did not give my mother a chance to talk me out of what I knew was right. I made the calls, I froze the accounts, and I held the line. And if you're sitting there right now, watching this, feeling like someone in your life has been treating your generosity as a given as a faucet, like my grandmother said, I want you to hear something. You are not obligated to keep the water running. That's not cruelty. That's not vindictiveness. That's not punishing someone for a misunderstanding. That's just knowing what belongs to you. And I do.